got something I want to read. This is a book called Straw Dogs. It's by John Gray, who holds a professorship in European thought, which is the English version or the European version of history of ideas at the London School of Economics, and he also holds a chair in philosophy at Oxford. Nothing is more alien to the present age than idleness. If we think of resting from our labors, it is only in order to return to them. In thinking so highly of work, we are aberrant. Few other cultures have ever done so. For nearly all of history and all prehistory, work was an indignity. Among Christians, only Protestants have ever believed that work smacks of salvation. The work and prayer of medieval Christendom were interspersed with festivals. The ancient Greeks sought salvation in philosophy, the Indians in meditation, the Chinese in poetry and the love of nature. The pygmies of the African rainforests, now nearly extinct, work only to meet the needs of the day and spend most of their lives idling. Progress condemns idleness. The work needed to deliver humanity is vast. Indeed, it is limitless, since as one plateau of achievement is reached, another looms up. Of course, this is only a mirage, but the worst of progress is not that it is an illusion, it is that it is endless. For the ancients, unending labor was the mark of a slave. The labors of Sisyphus are a punishment. In working for progress, we submit to a labor no less servile. I love this guy.
I think we all do now.
Wonderful.
Can you print that out for all of us?
Is it on Kindle?
This isn't on Kindle, as a matter of fact. This is only available as a paperback or a hardback. This was published about 2 years ago or something like that. No, I'm sorry. It was originally published in 2002.
I'll bet he put a lot of
The
work.
first American paperback edition was 2007. This is a very interesting book, and it's had quite a large impact on a lot of discussion recently.
Does it cover a wide range of subjects, the book?
It does. I feel really close to this guy because, first of all, I taught history of ideas, and the chairman of my department, Alistair McIntyre, turned out to be one of his teachers. Because Alistair is a Scot. And Alistair's had a big impact on the discussion of morality in recent decades. And so there's a lot of chapters on morality and vice and stuff like that. But he just came out recently with another book called The Silence of Animals.
John Gray or Alistair?
John Gray. And it's received quite wide notice. And there is a premonition of this new book in the very last sentence of this former book. And the last sentence of this book is, other animals do not need a purpose in life. A contradiction to itself, the human animal cannot do without one. Can we not think of the aim of life as being simply to see? That really resonates with me, of course. I think it resonates with anybody who is in this practice. Bearing witness is, for me anyway, the most important thing that I can do. And, you know, I have felt for a long time that the problems that civilization is currently facing, among which is global warming, is simply not ever going to be solved. Because the human animal seems to be, in recent centuries, totally devoted to progress, to improving our lot, quote unquote, to making things better, quote unquote. And what we are achieving, in fact, is our own doom. And that, as it turns out, is precisely the argument that John Gray is making in his new book, The Silence of Animals. And the object of his ire is liberal humanism, which is something that has been a pillar of Western thought for a very long time.
What is liberal humanism?
The embodiment, when I think about liberal humanism, the embodiment of that is Barack Obama. Humanism is, I mean, on the one hand you could say it's a philosophy, but really it is a vision of the world. And it consists basically of three things. The first one is that humans have a unique value in the world.
Huh.
You know? And we find ourselves, you know, reflecting this constantly. One of the texts that I was very much interested in when I was in college was a book called The Great Chain of Being, which is a way, Linnaeus was very familiar with the Great Chain of Being, and it provided the foundation for his classification of animals. Because the Great Chain of Being attempted to rank the worlds of animals and plants from the simplest to the most complex. And of course, the human beings are at the very top. And because of our position in the world, which is considered, as I said, unique, we have certain responsibilities that go along with that. The second thing is that the human mind reflects, to a very great extent, the order of the cosmos. Now, of course, I've had discussions about this sitting in this seat before. I look at it the exact opposite. You know, because this premise that the human mind reflects the order of the cosmos is very Cartesian, actually.
Is what?
Very Cartesian. And I prefer to look at it very differently, which is that the cosmos reflects the human mind instead of the other way around. And that the third characteristic of humanism is that history is the story of human advance with rationality increasing over time.
Hence the acquittal.
This is a, this is a very important premise that I think is shared by an awful lot of people. But one of the arguments that John Gray makes is that the one thing that all humans seem to have in common with each other is their irrationality, not their rationality. Of course, people point to science as evidence of the goodness of progress. And it's true that over time, we have succeeded in the creation of a technology which has greatly helped us, but at the same time enslaved us. So, I don't know if that's progress or not. Now, you can also say that this so-called progress in science only serves to underline the lack of progress in our social institutions, our political institutions, and the way we treat each other, because that hasn't changed at all. And what the technology and science has enabled us to do is to deal more harshly with one another than we ever had before.
So what's liberal humanism?
Well, liberal humanism is a belief that humans are rational, and that social and political institutions such as democracy and capitalism are ways of expressions of that rationality, and that the preeminence of those institutions creates happiness and safety. And as we are beginning to discover, that may not be the case at all. That in fact, we are enslaved to these different institutions, and that things continuing as they are, that eventually we will end up as an extinct species. Which, by the way, John Gray seems to believe. And the problem is that we aren't ruining this planet. We're ruining this species. And that the Earth, how does he put it? He puts this in a very interesting way. First of all, he doesn't talk about Homo sapiens, the species. He talks about Homo rapiens, the species. Oh. The ever-warming Earth is suffering from disseminated primate, a plague of people. Homo rapiens is savagely ravaging the planet like a filthy pest that has infested a once beautiful, well-appointed, and spacious house.
Sensei, does he have a form that he prefers? Because he doesn't like liberal humanism. Is he saying that's sort of the last gasp of humans on the planet, or there's another, better way of being?
It's rational, that's all.
Yes, his book is divided into three parts. The first part he talks about, the myth of science as progress. And I think that's right, I can't remember. Yeah, the myth of human progress. The second part has to do with the disposition of humans to mythologize themselves. And the third part is what he proposes as an alternative. And what he proposes as an alternative shocked me. Because here is a professor of European thought at the London School of Economics proposing something that is extremely radical. I'm trying to find, if I can find a quote. What he proposes is contemplation.
No texting then. Tweeting.
Contemplation can be understood as an activity that aims not to change the world or to understand it, but simply to let it be.
In other words, he's giving up.
Well, what he is proposing is bearing witness. What he's proposing is seeing it as it is. And it's interesting because he uses two people in particular as a buttress to this proposal. One of them is the poet, the American poet, Wallace Stevens. And the second one is a man by the name of A.J. Baker, who was a writer about wildlife. He wrote a book called The Peregrine and another book called The Hill of Summer. Those were the only two books he ever wrote. Baker died in 1987 when he was about 61. But he offers up these two people as an example of the kind of attitude that he is interested in promoting. Here's a poem by Wallace Stevens. Today the air is clear of everything. It has no knowledge except of nothingness, and it flows over us without meanings, as if none of us had ever been here before and are not now in this shallow spectacle, this invisible activity, this sense. As if nothingness contained a métier, a vital assumption, an impermanence, in its permanent cold, an illusion so desired. I ultimately was disappointed in the book because he leaves us in a place that is sort of a nihilistic place. Because his argument, and I think it is a good, fair argument, that is that the world is without meaning. That it is impossible for us to ascribe anything of importance or anything of meaning to anything on this planet, including particularly our own lives. And he leaves us sitting quietly, observing nature and the things around us with a transcendental mind. But there is no alternative to the nihilism that this seems to imply.
For him. He hasn't heard about the third tenet.
Well, I found it, you know, I found this book to be very interesting and edifying because I agreed with a lot of the arguments that led up to this place. But I was surprised that he wasn't able or willing to take the added step. And for me, that illustrated the limits of my graduate education. And it also showed me the importance of my present practice, because I don't feel that way. I mean, I do when I'm out watching birds. I do when I'm sitting on my cushion. But as we all know, we have to get up from the cushion. And we have to take that step off the 100-foot pole. And we have to do something. Now, I, you know, have tried to shape my life around that. Because I am not a captain of industry. I am not someone who is demanding an increase in the gross national product of 3 to 4% annually. I'm not interested in making a lot of money. I'm conscious about, you know, my carbon footprint. But more than that, I understand that I'm here to serve. And that's the step the great has not taken.
Have you read his new book?
Yeah.
And he still hasn't taken it?
No.
Send him a letter. Send him your talk.
Yeah, send him a copy of this.
Well, you know, it's you know, it's funny. This week, there were a couple of articles that appeared in different publications that I read. One appeared in Wired magazine, and it was about meditation in Silicon Valley. Apparently, meditation in Silicon Valley has become all the rage. And all the companies who have any pretense to being an important company has a meditation program now for its employees, which they insist they do. Of course. Or they very firmly,
Is
they
it
very,
worked in with cardio?
they very firmly insinuate that they do.
Sounds like Steve Jobs.
That was one, and of course the whole reason for the adoption of meditation in Silicon Valley is to improve your job performance. You know, to improve your creative energy, or whatever other phrase they choose to use. That was one article. That was in Wired magazine, and then there was another article in Salon magazine on Tim Ryan and what's Sanford's first name? I can't think of his first. Mark Sanford. They have a congressional meditation group.
Oh my God.
Bernie Sanders?
Hmm?
No, Bernie Sanders or Sanford?
No, it's Mark Sanford. Tim Ryan and Mark Sanford.
Sanford's the Appalachian Trail guy, right?
Yeah.
And Tim Ryan is actually not Paul Ryan, he's another guy
Yeah, he's a congressman of someplace.
from,
Oh, I was thinking.
But the whole point of this is to see if meditation could somehow ameliorate the animosity that exists within the Congress.
even if you just don't interact.
No, for that.
I'm glad we can't.
Get those
The reason that I mention this is because You know, it is very difficult for human beings to take something like meditation or contemplation or however you want to describe it and not find a gain in it. You know? It's virtually impossible to do that.
Well, you're asking Westerners not to be Westerners, or it's not limited to Westerners, but you're asking, I mean,
I know. But I was proud of the fact that John Gray that was proposing that kind of, you know, a meditation that had no gain. And I think that's very important, but there's more to it than that. Meditation is a very important part of this practice, but it is only one part of it. You know, I think that another part of it is this Sangha. And what we do in this room is a Sangha, of which there was abundant evidence this morning.
Screw up.
Well, you know, that's a great example. I mean, there is the service which is going on, but at the same time there is another whole thing going on about the Sangha, which is very important too. You know, and the service provides the vehicle for all the rest of it to take place.
For all the eye rolling.